Tara, I'm going to hand over to you. So the floor is yours.
Let's unmute. Yes, thank you very much, Niall. Very, very pleased to be here. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes, just give you an overview of what imposter syndrome is. I have an anonymous poll in the middle, which Niall's going to run for us. And then, so it's a little bit of interactivity. And then I'm going to take questions towards the end so that we've got a lot of, answering the questions that you really want to be answered. I am going to share some slides just because it adds a bit of variety. So if Niall, you can allow me to share.
Bear with me 1 second. Now, should be able to.
Share screen, marvelous. Okay, so I'll start with my 60-second or less introduction. I'm Tara Halliday. My PhD is in engineering, which I did before I got into the psychology side of the world. I'm a specialist in imposter syndrome. It's all I do. I've been a holistic therapist and coach for 20 years, and I am the author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Unmasking, which is the coach's guide to imposter syndrome. So here's my qualifications here, neurofeedback included, and I'm the creator of an 8-week one-to-one program for C-level executives and business owners to get rid of imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is like imagining, say you're on a podium, right? And everyone around you is applauding you, they're congratulating you, they're for your great success. But with imposter syndrome, you don't feel that success, even though people are applauding you. You actually feel more like you're in a pit. You feel like you're isolated, you feel a bit confused, you feel frustrated by it, you might have anxiety or a sense of overwhelm. And so that difference between the two states of what other people see and how you feel inside is imposter syndrome. And the definition of it is secretly feeling like you're a fraud when you're not. So you're a successful person, but you're just not connecting with it. And with that comes the fear of being found out. Now, 70% of high achievers experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career. That's men and women equally. There's no difference between the genders at all. And so that's a large number. And one of the problems with imposter syndrome is that everybody keeps it a secret because they think it's them, because they think it's a personality flaw, a weakness, and they don't want other people to know that. And because everyone keeps it a secret, then nobody knows how prevalent it is. So when it happens, then people think it's just them, which makes it even worse. So the impact it has, the confusion between the gap between how well you're actually doing and how you're actually feeling is very confusing and frustrating. Secrecy, the isolation, you feel like you don't belong. It's distracting. So there's nagging thoughts that come in your head, and is the am I good enough question. It can lead to anxiety, reactivity, so you're a bit more emotionally reactive than less calm than you normally are. You can make poor decisions, and it can even lead to burnout. So it is a serious issue. It's not a mental health issue. It's not something that you'd go to see a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist for. It's considered normal functioning, but just because it's normal functioning doesn't mean it's happy functioning. So I'll give you an example of Daniel. So Daniel was a lawyer. He lived in the north of England and he did very well. His name was in the newspaper for some of the cases he'd won, and he got offered a job in London at a very prestigious law firm. And the first thing he did when he got there was he started comparing himself to his colleagues, and they were first and second generation barristers who'd been to private education, and that was very different from Daniel's experience. So he felt like he didn't belong. And so there's an escalation. He would keep it a secret, didn't tell anyone. He'd moved, so he had no friends in the area. So the stress was mounting. when he did a good job, because he was very good at his job, and he got praised for it, he would just hit it right back. He would deflect the praise. Oh, it wasn't me, or I just got lucky. And he wasn't just being humble, he genuinely believed that. He didn't connect with his success. He got perfectionist, so he spent all the hours working and overworking, over preparing for presentations. He would hide his opinions or his views. He wouldn't speak up enough, which was even more frustrating because he knew he had valuable things to contribute. He would sometimes lie defensively to stop anyone finding out that he's a fraud, but of course he's not a fraud. And this all leads to that experience of imposter syndrome. And so this is some of the typical behaviors that people with imposter syndrome exhibit. So here's the list in more fully. So there's secrecy, procrastinating, particular kind of procrastination, deflecting praise, as I mentioned, hiding, avoiding roles. So everybody who's in the career and placement industry. So a classic of avoiding roles is not taking promotion, not applying for something unless you tick absolutely every one of the ideal candidate boxes, and even arranging interviews and then cancelling them at the last minute, all to avoid. So all of these, this set of behaviours is about hoping that people don't find out that you're a fraud, that you're not as good as they think you are. That's the thinking behind it. Then there's another set of behaviors, which is feeling like you're not quite good enough, so trying to become better. So perfectionism creeps in. You're comparing yourself, as Daniel did, to how other people looking on the outside to how you're feeling on the inside. There's the over-preparing. Not having enough is a sense that you never quite have enough, and that's typically qualifications or experience, no matter how much you have it. And then pushing through, which is basically thinking it's just you, and you're just going to have to force your way through this stress that you're feeling. Now, I want to say that this is high achievers that we're talking about. This is top level business owners, executives, government leaders. These are at a very high level, and you can see that we had Meryl Streep, for example, has talked about imposter syndrome publicly, and she has won more awards than any actor in history, and yet she still wonders why anyone would want to come and see her in her next film. So before I get onto the cause of imposter syndrome, so I'll leave you hanging with that, I think we should go to the poll if we can, Niall. So Niall's going to bring up a poll with a list of those imposter syndrome behaviours. And what I'd like you to do you need me to stop sharing, or are we okay?
I'm about to launch it. Just let me know when you want me to do it.
If you launch and I'll talk, so okay. That's good. Yeah. So there's this list of the different imposter syndrome behaviors. If you recognize these in you, you might have a combination of anyone. I would like you to pick one. This is anonymous poll, completely anonymous. Pick one of them that's most significant for you. And then what I'll do is, once we've closed the poll, then I'll give you a quick tip to what you can do to address that particular imposter syndrome behavior. So please go ahead and vote, and I will just vote as well. And then Niall, when you have all the information, if you could let me know what that most common behavior is.
Okay, yeah, I've got so far 5 out of 8. If anyone still...
Yeah, it's completely anonymous. Nobody can see what you're saying.
We've done a minute now, so I'll wait another minute.
Is there a clear winner?
There is a clear winner so far. There's one more person that hasn't voted, but yes, everyone's voted. Lovely. And so no one could see what everyone's voting, could they? So there's a clear winner: procrastinating.
Procrastinating. Okay.
So you can see the results there.
Right. By quite a long chalk. Yes. So the particular way that procrastination comes up with imposter syndrome is it tends to be a little combination of perfectionism and over preparing and procrastination. So what will happen is that the procrastination that is related to imposter syndrome, actually, let me stop sharing because that's distracting. So the procrastination that's related to imposter syndrome is one where you don't want other people to see your very best work, because if they did see your very best work, then that would be disaster, because they'll then cotton on to the fact that you're not as good as they think you are. So people procrastinate in order to protect themselves from that situation. And so very often that'll look like you have a deadline and then you don't do anything, then very last minute you may be pulled an all-nighter to get whatever it is ready, or a report presentation or something like that, and then you do it the next day. Now, because this is high achievers who are very talented and very capable and competent, that's still good enough work, right? They're still doing a good job, but what they're doing is protecting themselves just in case anyone criticized it. That person would know internally, oh, well, that's not my best work. So it wouldn't feel that any potential criticism wouldn't feel so devastating. So that's the unconscious rationale in imposter syndrome for why you're procrastinating. And the feeling of having this project to do can feel overwhelming. So to kind of pace yourself, you can do it on a small scale. So what you can do is, rather than tackle the whole project, give yourself 5 minutes and say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes on this, and then I'm going to stop and go and do something else. And that just seems to take the edge off this all or nothing in terms of, putting together a project. So that's a little tip for procrastination. All right, so I will carry on with the slides and showing you the cause of imposter syndrome. So we've seen how it shows up. And so it shows up in 3 different ways. It shows up in the mind, in the thoughts, the feeling of I'm not quite good enough, everybody's going to find me out. It shows up in the body in terms of stress. So imposter syndrome very often triggers the fight, flight, and freeze response, because there's this fear of being found out. And that creates a huge amount of chronic stress and anxiety and overwhelm. And then the actions, the third part of it, are the behaviours that we were just talking about. So when people try and tackle imposter syndrome, they very often try and sort themselves out, right? They'll try and do something to stop themselves procrastinating. They'll try and do meditation to keep them, to keep their body calmer. They'll try all sorts of talk strategies to try and talk themselves out of that feeling of not being quite good enough. But actually there is a root cause of imposter syndrome that drives all 3 of these. And this is a belief. And this is a belief. It's an unconscious belief. It's a very deep-seated belief, identity level. It's who we are. It's a belief that our worth is conditional, that our worth depends on what we do. So if I do something good, I am good. If I do something bad, I am bad, which is a very old construct or model in the brain, if you like. And that leads to feelings of not quite being good enough, or not being quite good enough. When you change this belief, then you get into all sorts of things that people try and achieve in a different way, but these automatically come out of it because you're taking away the driver for it. So instead of pushing through, you've got this effortless confidence. You feel lighter, you feel calm, You're resilient, so it doesn't matter what people say or think of you. You feel centered and calmed in yourself. You're authentic to your values. You're not distracted anymore, so you have that focus, and you're able to use all the resources that you have, all the talents and skills that you have, and really make an impact. So that's essentially what I wanted to share in terms of the slides, all about imposter syndrome. So I can open it up now to questions, if that's okay.
Very much. Great. Okay. So we have plenty of time now for any questions or comments. Does anyone have anything burning they'd like to put to Tara?
You know, Tara, it's really, really interesting. It's interesting. I quite often say to the clients that I work with, by the nature of what I do at Optitude, I talk about belief systems. So, you know, belief systems are, you know, probably the hardest thing that we can change in human beings is our belief. I mean, this is probably one, you know, like the most fundamental, deep-seated, you know, kind of thing to change. You know, do you believe that this can be, I mean, do you feel that that change can, long-term change can be brought about by such, you know, from such a deep-seated belief?
Yes, I would say that the very short answer is yes. Let me just see if I can get a diagram up for you. Oh, no, okay. I'm just going to have to wave my hands then. Okay, so in terms of beliefs, so Carl Jung has a model of the mind, which is an iceberg. So the top 10% is above the surface and visible, and he relates that to the conscious mind, and then the bottom 90% is underwater, invisible, unconscious. And beliefs come in at different levels, if you like. So you've got this kind of surface level beliefs. Say you're going to do an investment in a particular stock, and you do all your research, and you decide that one particular company is good. You invest in them, and then your brain creates this shortcut, this belief, this is a good investment. And so what you'll find is that you then don't have to do the research, right? This is the point of beliefs. It's making the brain more efficient, because the brain uses so much energy, it uses 20% of your body's energy. So if you've got a surface level like belief like that, it's very easy to update and change. You might hang on to it a little longer, you know, as the stock's going down and you're hanging on thinking, I still think it's a good stock. But, you know, it's relatively easy to change, and there are techniques. This is where mindset comes in. This is where neurolinguistic programming comes in, affirmations, all of those work on kind of the surface level. As you get deeper into the unconscious, you get more fixed beliefs. You get what people consider to be true about the world, because belief is just a model of that your brain holds of what is true about the world. And so people get more fixed beliefs. So people get fixed beliefs about politics and religion, for example, and this is the truth about how the world works. And this is why, as you suggested, you know, that these tend to be slower to change, definitely. So right at the very bottom of this iceberg, right at the very bottom, is the identity level beliefs, who we believe ourselves to be, who we are. And those, you're absolutely right, they're harder to change, because your model of how the world works, that your brain holds, is precious to your brain. It doesn't want to change it, doesn't want to update it, because its focus is to allow you to survive and thrive in this environment. And so when it's got an idea that it considers to be true, it holds on to it. The identity level beliefs are very much, consider to be very true. And what happens in the brain, I'm going a little bit off into neuroscience here, but I hope that's okay. So what happens in the brain, say if you have this belief, an identity level belief, thank you, Niall, you have an identity level belief, and the brain has something called confirmation bias. So it looks to check and reinforce and support its existing model before it spends the energy of updating the model. So you have a situation that confirms that belief, and it kind of layers on top, and then you have another situation that confirms it, and so you're getting these layers and layers of confirming beliefs. And the way the brain works on a ratio of 3 to 1, it pays more attention to the negative aspects of things basically in order to focus on survival. So that's basically what's going on. So in order to update these beliefs, the first thing you have to do is a very specific process to change these locked in experiences. You have to let it go. So that you do by changing how part of your brain, the amygdala, responds to it. So you go back to a particular event, and then there's a specific set of steps that you go through, and then the emotional charge from that past event, it goes. And once that emotional charge goes, then you can go to a few deeper, and then that'll allow you access to the belief. But it does take that process. And I came across this process. I worked as a neurofeedback trainer. So we put electrodes on people's heads and measured their alpha brain waves in a dark chamber while they were going through a belief change process. And through between 30 and 40 years, not my work, but 30 and 40 years of iterating about what made dramatic positive changes in people's brains, measured through their brainwaves, this is where this particular process came from. And then I've brought in the most recent neuroscience research and just checked which of these steps in this process actually has a neuroscience basis, and then condense them. So that's the very, very long answer to your question.
Blimey. Oh, God. I was going to say, I mean,
yes.
it is very interesting. It is very interesting. I mean, the only caveat that I have is, I mean, the map is not the territory, I mean, which is the thing with neuroscience. Yeah, the brain waves and the way that these things are measured are one thing, but the reality is we don't really know, where we don't have a level of understanding just yet to be able to really put any certainty on it. I mean, in fairness, I know, I think the things that we can do to make a positive difference to this, though, are fantastic, as is proved with, helping people get over post-traumatic stress and, various other things. So I'm not denying it. I think it's great.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So the neuroscience is really you're absolutely right, in its infancy at the moment. And every year there's new things coming out. And I think this is why, imposter syndrome was identified back in 1978. The belief that causes it was identified back in 1950 by Dr. Carl Rogers. So it's taken a long time for us to have the knowledge, the resources, the understanding to be able to change the beliefs. Back in the 1950s, it was thought that you didn't generate any new brain cells, that your brain was fixed by a relatively young age. Now we know that the brain has what's called neuroplasticity. It's able to change even to those deeper levels of belief. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Tara, thanks very much. Really fascinating. Where does, or indeed does, fear of being judged or fear of looking a fool fit with imposter syndrome?
Is very closely related, because being judged, right? If you've got a fear of being judged, then it's a fear of what, right? That you're not good enough, right? That somebody's telling you you're not good enough. And to our primitive brains, if we're judged and criticized and we're not good enough, we don't belong, people don't care about us, they will chuck us out of the tribe, and then we'll be on our own in primeval environment, and we won't survive for very long. So there's this wanting to be, to belong, and to feel like we're okay. So those fears are absolutely related, where the belief about our worth being conditional comes from. So when a baby's born, so it's very young, when a baby's born, it's just starting to create this model of what the world is and the environment. Starts with its body and gets in contact with that. But until it's about 18 months old, a baby doesn't really have much sense of separation. It doesn't see itself as a separate thing. An object, if you like, and so it has no boundaries. So if it gets told that it's done something bad, its actions, then it takes as I am bad, because there's no difference between its actions and who they are, their identity. Between 18 months and 3 years, they develop a sense of self as a separate being. But unless they very specifically have that belief that their worth and who they are, what they do and their worth, who they are and what they do are the same, unless they're specifically taught they're separate, then they persist, that persists. And so that's the root, if you like, of imposter syndrome. It's the root of fear of being judged, fear of being criticized, because it has that consequence, being thrown out of the tribe. And this is why back in 1950s, Carl Rogers, who identified worth being the most common and most harmful belief for personal happiness, his conclusion was, unless you grow up, unless you get really lucky with your family, and because 99.999% of people have, don't have that belief challenged and corrected, if you like. So part of the work is actually going back and then rewriting that one.
Warren, would you like to come in?
Yes, please. Thanks, guys. Great, Tara. It's really interesting what you're describing. I just had a question on the layers. Like, how do you know how far you need to go? So as you were describing the layer, the emotional charge, I noticed that when you get stressed out and you take some time to think and you get some space and some air, and then you allow your mind to decide which one's right and which one's wrong, and then what your mind's telling you versus what you should be thinking, okay? But how far do you know you need to go? So like, have you reached the bottom of it? Or like, you know what I mean? So how far do you need to go before you've realized, okay, I've reached the point where now there's nothing further below this and the only way is up? You know what I mean?
I do. So we're talking about a few circumstances here. So the first one you were talking about is being triggered into that fight, flight, and freeze state. So something's stressing you out, and your body, wants to run away or fight or hide or stop. That is controlled or triggered, if you like, by the amygdala. So the amygdala is part of the brain. There's one on either side. And it's like a computer virus checker. It's checking all the information, the billions of bits of information that are coming into your whole system from externally through your senses, and obviously interactions with other people, and internally through your thoughts. So it's filtering all of that information, looking for danger, right? So primeval times, that was the tiger, the snake. It was very easy. It's very, very well defined. These days, it's not. But when the way it does that is it stores emotional memories. That is a combination of facts of situation and the emotion associated with it when that thing happened. So you can see along the lines of post-traumatic stress disorder, when people talk about that they have this association between situations and the feelings. So that it's a smaller version of that, basically milder version of that. Now the amygdala learns automatically without your conscious thought. Right, so through all your history and everything, you know, it's learned that, okay, that situation is dangerous, that situation, and it's not necessarily ones you've been through, it'd be ones that you've witnessed, seen other people go through and see, and had that emotional reaction to it. So this is how these layers form, right? Because the negative situation that layers on top of it is programmed, if you like, into the amygdala automatically, right? So that's the territory that we're looking at. So next, the brain also stores memories by association. Yeah, so a smell will remind you of something else and somebody else, the reason why the amygdala works in situational environments, like, I don't know, giving a presentation or speaking to the board or something like that, is because of that association with similar incidents in the past. So your question is, how far back do we have to go? And because it's associative, it's actually surprisingly not very far at all. So there is in my program, it's an 8-week program, and I teach this in the middle 3 weeks of that program. I teach people how to do the process that lets go of the emotional charge of a particular one. And by the time people have got to about 15, then they've made a significant difference, like a huge difference in terms of their feelings about themselves. Because first they let go of the situation, and then there's the emotional charge about the other person involved. And then the next step is to let go of the, if you like, the judgments, the criticisms, the negative feelings about the self. And when you get to that level of self-acceptance, that is you feeling unconditionally worthy, that your worth does not depend on what you do. So that's that separation there. So yes, not years of psychotherapy, things like that.
Has someone else got a question or a comment? Go, Sally.
Mine's more of an observation, really. So when you were talking about procrastination and saying, do a little bit, don't force yourself to try and do the whole thing, that I found really interesting. And last year I read a book that some of you may have read called Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is brilliant about getting things done. And I loved the, don't say you're going to go out and run 10 kilometers. Say, today I'm going to put my trainers on. And if you go for a run, you're much more likely to do it, but don't say I'm going to go and run 26 miles, because it won't happen. And I think it ties in a way with what you're doing, the kind of habit stacking that he talks about finding something you do every day. So it could be sitting down and having a coffee. And if you say, I should, it's this whole talk we were talking about earlier, that word of I should. But if you decided that you wanted to read more business books or do something more positive, actually making the time to do that while you're doing something you would do anyway, and having that positive association, because you're much more likely to do it. And I think if it feels that if you can find a way of getting positive associations with things, and maybe train your amygdala that way, that could be a good way to do it.
That's actually a wonderful thing to do. So you're absolutely right. So when I recommended doing a small time block of doing something, what you're doing is you're doing something that you perceive, the brain will perceive as very safe, right? Oh, I'm only going to write the outline and then I'm going to go, right? So it doesn't get to the point of, oh, this presentation is like a tiger in the room and trigger your amygdala and trigger you into the fight flight. So it's about, little safe steps, safe for your amygdala. The other part of, and so absolutely associating what you're doing with something positive as well, or even neutral, again, it's helping calm. So the process of getting rid of imposter syndrome starts with calm. First, calm the nervous system, tools to calm the nervous system, then clearing out the thought processes and the beliefs, and that's what I was talking about earlier, and then create. So creating new success habits from that. And that's how you get rid of imposter syndrome.
3 C's. I like that.
3 C's, yes.
Calm, clear, and create.
Yes.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So I wrote down several questions, but I think the one I really want to ask is around why does it matter? But I'm asking that possibly at an individual level or an aggregate level. I mean, has there been any sort of assessment done of if all the imposter syndrome in the world was fixed, like what impact would it have? And on the other side, if it's left and something's not done about it, I mean, Meryl Streep still had all that success, but she has it, you know. So I'm just trying to get a feeling of how big of an issue is this to the world, and how big of an issue is it treated or untreated to individuals? You know, is there any? Can you give us a sort of sense of that?
Yeah, well, if you go back to that story of Daniel, what happened with Daniel is that after 2 months in his high-profile job, he was so stressed that he quit before anyone could fire him, even though he was doing really well, and was burnt out and spent 3 months in bed. So people quit careers. So, you know, in your career career change world, you'll find people changing their careers because they think the problem is their job. And the trouble is they'll go and they'll change the career, and they'll get to a certain level of challenge again, and they'll find that it's back. So imposter syndrome comes and goes with high challenge and low support. And so without imposter syndrome, your world is just so different. All those things that I said about resilient, effortlessly confident, it's that you forget to doubt yourself. It's not that you're fighting the thoughts and trying to push them away. You literally forget to doubt yourself because the amygdala is not triggering, saying this is a dangerous situation.
So basically, you for those 70% of people impacted, the successful people, if you could eradicate it, then there'd be a lot less fear and anxiety in the world. Basically, if people would just enjoy their success.
They'd enjoy their success. They'd be more focused. They'd be able to perform better as well. Right? They're successful despite their imposter syndrome. So and you know, which you know shows how remarkable, you know, these talented people are. And
then the follow-on question is kind of how do you get people to pay attention to it then if it is such a big problem and it has such an impact? How does one get people to care about it? How does one get it on the radar of people more widely, or what's the answer to that?
I think, Niall, you're doing it exactly here right now, right? You're holding a group and we're talking about it. You know, I mentioned the secrecy. People think it's them. People think it's a personality flaw, it's a weakness, and they think it's just them. And in keeping it a secret, nobody's aware of it. And what we're doing, if you do a Google Trends chart on imposter syndrome, you'll see kind of like this hockey stick curve that's going up. It's talked about more now, and we're just continuing to have that conversation. Unfortunately, because again, as we were saying, neuroscience is such a new subject. Imposter syndrome has become a little bit trendy in some areas to talk about. So people will talk about imposter syndrome, but not really understand what it is and have all sorts of solutions for it. So you have people who try to, you know, you have people who try to help people with their confidence, right? But it's not a confidence issue. Like the people who have it are high achievers. They're competent, they're capable, they know technically, logically, that they can do their jobs and they're good enough. They're just not feeling it on the inside. Yeah. So yeah, spreading the word and continuing to talk about it. And
great. So we're just into the last couple of minutes. I wonder if anyone has a final comment or a takeaway from the session. Warren?
Yeah, just the 8-week course. How does it entail, or is there a way we can find out more information?
Yeah, let me give you all my details. Just
best way to reach you is through your LinkedIn.
Yeah, best way to reach. I'll put something in the chat right now. So I have a quiz, right, that you can. All right, so that's my website, my LinkedIn profile address, and there's a free imposter syndrome quiz, which, you basically checks out how severe imposter syndrome might be for you.
Sorry,
And
Phil.
that will lead you to me.
So I saw Phil's got his hand up. So do you want to jump in, Phil?
At one time in my life, I studied psychotherapy and hypnotherapy, and I wondered what you thought about the use of hypnosis to help with imposter syndrome.
Yeah, you remember I was talking about the iceberg so the surface level. I think that's what hypnotherapy works with, because hypnotherapy is basically inserting a new idea, a new belief into the model of the brain. And that will be successful if there's not something deeper that's contradicting it. If there's something that's contradicting it, it's not going to stick. So yeah, that's where it fits in as far as I can see.
I'm just interested to understand then how you access, I mean, because, the unconscious, by the actual term itself is inaccessible. We can't, physically know it. We might be able to know events that have taken place and maybe, brought about some of these things, but anyone can relate back to a trauma, but my question would be, how would you know that you're relating back to the right trauma?
Because memories are associative, you don't have to be laser focused, get the right one. You pick one.
It's also creative. It's also creative and changes over a period of time. So again, I'd still ask the question, how can you be sure you're hitting the right things?
Yeah, so that would be just the results of it, just how people are feeling, that the people, like, for example, there was one woman who wasn't quoting for contracts, for example. So she had her own business, she wasn't quoting for contracts. After she'd done the program, she got given an opportunity which previously would have had her going into, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough, surely I can't, and turn it down. She forgot to do that, if you like. She just saw the opportunity. So that's the kind of thing. People don't trigger you so much. Events don't trigger you so much. So if you like, in terms of that amygdala sensitivity, your amygdala sensitivity to those groups of events, associative events, is much lower. And it really has phenomenal impact on people's, calm. They feel calmer, they feel lighter, they feel resilient. They also have more compassion. Their leadership is better because they're not coming from a place of defensiveness and protectiveness, and they become more empathic. They mentor, they become more true to their core values, which is really interesting, because we've taken away those layers of things that were keeping them stuck and causing behaviors.
I'm aware that the time is up, and I think that's a really nice note to end on, because I was thinking the sort of so what of it all is like all the positive side if it's treated. And I think what I'm going to do with this particular one is I will share some additional information with the recording on the page, because it's just been, I found it super fascinating, and something that impacts so many people. So thanks again, Tara Halliday.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Taking the time to come and have this great session with us. It's been really fascinating. And I need to just tell you that the next peer-based talk is in 3 weeks, not in 2 weeks, with Eva Gumnishka from Humans in the Loop, someone I know from Bulgaria, from my Bulgaria days, and she runs a charity for refugees, getting refugees in Bulgaria into different, I think mainly technology roles, but she's got quite an interesting story around that. So she's going to come and do her piece on that journey. Thank you everyone for coming along. The best way to just follow everything in terms of future events is on the Peerspace LinkedIn page. There is a Facebook group as well and page. The group has similar information. And yeah, thank you for being part of it, and hope to see you again.
Thanks, Niall.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Dan.
See
Bye.
you all the best. See you later.